The moment my son left my suitcase on the front steps, I knew 12 years of quiet were about to pay off in a way he could never imagine. I stood there in my good dress, watching my own child lock me out of the life I knew. What they didn't understand was that what they'd discarded was about to become worth $8 million. If you're hearing this, consider subscribing and letting me know where you're joining from. Let me tell you how a woman with nothing went from a motel room to the most coveted address in Millbrook Heights. Because, darling, the best answer to being cast aside isn't a cold dish of revenge, it's a life of undeniable, roaring success. My name is Margaret Williams, though I go by Maggie. At 72, I've learned there's nothing sweeter than making those who wrote you off wish they'd never underestimated you. And my son James and his wife Jessica gave me everything to prove. It was a crisp October day when my world shattered. I'd been staying with them for 3 months after my husband passed, helping with their little ones while I found my footing. The life insurance was modest, and I believed family lifted each other up.
"Mom, we need to talk," James said that morning, his tone unfamiliar and chilled. Jessica stood behind him, arms folded, wearing a look that could slice through steel. At 33, she possessed a pointed beauty that kept people at a distance. "What is it, dear?" I asked, setting my coffee mug on the granite countertop I'd helped pay for with my own Social Security. "This isn't working," Jessica stated, stepping forward as if she held the deed to the conversation. "You're too fixed in your routine. The children are confused about who makes the rules." I looked to James, waiting for him to remember I was the mother who raised him alone after his father left. Instead, he stared past me as if I were a stranger. "Where would I go?" I asked, my voice coming out softer than I wished. "That really isn't our concern," Jessica replied with a shrug that would linger in my memory for years. "You're an adult. You'll manage." 20 minutes later, 60 years of my life were packed into 2 suitcases and a single box. The rest, Jessica chirped, was destined for donation. "Let's not drag this out," James murmured, placing my bags on the porch. For a second, I saw the little boy who once cried when I left for work. Then Jessica appeared, and his expression went blank. The taxi arrived as the rain began. I got in without a backward glance, not from strength but from sheer fracture. In the rear view, I saw Jessica already adjusting the curtains in what had been my room. I had $847 in my purse. No job, no home. What I couldn't yet see was that this humiliation would become the very fuel for the greatest comeback of my life. The Sunset Motel on Route 9 was my address for the next 6 weeks. $43 a night, bought a room that smelled of bleach and faded hopes, but it had a lock on the door. After being tossed out, even that felt like a luxury. The kind older clerk, Mr. Patterson, noticed me after a week. "You're not our usual sort," he said softly, sliding an extra towel my way. Most mornings, I'd wake forgetting where I was until reality rushed back. No grandchildren's laughter, no family breakfast, just me and an air conditioner that groaned like a creature in pain. But here's what they didn't account for. I've never been one to stay down. When James was small and we had nothing, I worked 3 jobs to keep us afloat. Survival wasn't new to me. I'd just forgotten how capable I was. Each morning, I walked to the library. Free internet, free air conditioning, and free access to opportunity. At 60, no one was lining up to hire me, But I wasn't seeking charity. I was hunting for a chance.
You have bookkeeping experience? Asked Sarah Mitchell at Mitchell's Garden Center during my 4th interview that week. She had soil under her nails and a directness I liked immediately. 20 years, I said. I managed the books for my late husband's business. What I didn't say was that I'd already spotted 3 ways her business was leaking money just from sitting in her office. The pay isn't much, she warned. $15 an hour, part-time. When do I start?
That first check was $240, and it felt like a fortune. After watching my savings vanish, earning again was like coming up for air. Slowly, the motel room started to feel less like a stopgap and more like a home. I bought a small coffee maker, hung my few photos, and even treated myself to a plant for the windowsill. If this was my life now, I would live it with dignity.
3 months in, I found my first real opening. Sarah was discarding thousands in unsold plants each season. "It's just how it's done," she said with a resigned sigh. But I saw something else. Potential.
You want to do what with the dead plants? Sarah asked, eyeing me as if I'd lost my senses. They're not dead, I explained. They're dormant. With care, most can be revived. By then, I'd moved to a tiny studio above a pizza shop. The rent was $650, leaving me little, but it was mine. Sarah let me take 3 truckloads of discarded plants that November, perhaps to teach me a lesson. Instead, it taught me I had a gift I never knew. My apartment became a greenhouse. Every surface held a pot or planter. I researched, watched videos, and spent evenings nursing wilted stems back to life. The downstairs neighbor thought I was running something suspicious. "Too many plants," she'd mutter. But by spring, something magical happened. Green shoots emerged, buds formed. My studio was a jungle of thriving plants. "Maggie, what on earth?" Sarah gasped when I brought the first batch back. "These look better than new." "Told you they weren't dead," I said, hiding a smile. Inside, I was soaring. Sarah bought every plant back at half the original price. In one transaction, I made $847, exactly what I'd had when I was cast out. More than money, I'd found purpose again. The next year, we made it official. Sarah would set aside unsellable plants, I'd rehabilitate them through winter, and we'd split the spring profits. It wasn't an empire, but it was mine. Word spread. "That woman in Mitchell's can revive anything," people said. Soon, other garden centers called. By year 2, I made more from plants than from bookkeeping. I'd moved to a larger place with a balcony and turned a friendly neighbor's lot into a growing space. Every saved plant felt like proof. Being discarded doesn't mean you're without worth. Some things just need the right person to see their potential. Year 3 was when I started thinking bigger. I had a wait list of garden centers, but my apartment operation was overflowing. My landlord added fees for drainage, and the pizza shop owner was tired of customers asking to buy plants off his lot. "You need a real facility," Sarah told me over coffee, "and you need to think beyond just saving plants." She was right, but thinking bigger required capital I didn't have. My savings had grown to $15,000, a fortune to me, but not enough for commercial space. That's when I met Eleanor Rodriguez at the Small Business Development Center. Eleanor was sharp, perceptive, and unafraid to push people toward their potential. "You're not in plant rescue," she declared after reviewing my numbers. "You're in the business of turning waste into profit. That's a different conversation entirely."
Eleanor helped me see what I'd been too close to notice. I was solving a major industry problem. Garden centers nationwide were discarding millions in inventory annually. What if you franchise the process? Eleanor suggested. Teach others, take a percentage, scale it. The idea was equal parts terrifying and thrilling. Me? A 63-year-old who'd been without a home 3 years prior, running a national operation? But the numbers were undeniable. We spent 6 months crafting a business plan. I'd start with a proper facility, perfect the process, document everything, then license the method nationwide. The SBA loan application was 47 pages. I nearly quit 3 times, but Eleanor pushed me through. This isn't a hobby, she insisted. It's a solution. Mrs. Williams, the loan officer said in my final interview, your projections seem optimistic. I leaned forward, confidence steady. 3 years ago, I lived in a motel with less than $1,000. Last year, I turned $50,000 of dead plants into $200,000 in revenue. My record speaks for itself. The $150,000 loan approval came on a Tuesday. I signed the papers with slightly trembling hands, realizing I was now responsible for more money than I'd ever dreamed. Within 6 months, I leased a 5,000-square-foot warehouse, hired 2 part-time employees, and secured contracts with 15 garden centers across 3 states. Phoenix Plant Recovery, because everything deserves a second chance, was officially born. The irony wasn't lost on me. My son had thrown me away as worthless. Now I was building an empire, proving that nothing is ever truly without potential. By year 5, Phoenix Plant Recovery operated in 12 states with 47 licensed operators. I'd just signed a consulting deal with a major retailer's regional headquarters. The woman once discarded was now flown to corporate meetings. Your story is exactly what our industry needs, a YIT executive told me during a store tour. Turning waste into profit while helping the planet, that's the future. I smiled, still adjusting to being seen as an expert rather than an inconvenience. The journey wasn't easy. There were 18-hour days, failed experiments, and moments of doubt. But each challenge taught me more about business and my own resilience. My personal life settled too. I moved to a lovely apartment in the historic district, made genuine friends, and found joy in a weekly book club. The financial success was staggering, over $2 million in annual revenue, and my net worth had crossed into 7 figures. I tracked the numbers, not from greed, but as a measure of my independence. Thought about international expansion? My attorney asked during a review. We're getting inquiries from abroad. One step at a time, I replied, though the idea intrigued me. Let's ensure we're solid first. The true satisfaction came from smaller victories, hiring a young man everyone else had overlooked but who had a gift with plants, or seeing Sarah sell her garden center to become one of my licensed operators in Florida. You've changed what I thought was possible, Sarah told me at her retirement party. Watching you build this from nothing has inspired half the women in town to take their own leaps. I began keeping a journal of lessons learned. The foremost, never let someone else decide your worth. James and Jessica deemed me a burden, something to be removed. Little did they know, they were handing me the motivation to become everything they never imagined. Every signed contract, every new location, every success was proof their judgment was spectacularly wrong. And honestly, I was only beginning. The house hunt started as practicality and culminated as the most satisfying statement imaginable. After years in apartments, I needed space for my growing ventures. What I found was the perfect way to show Millbrook that Margaret Williams was no longer disposable. The Harrison estate? My realtor, Jennifer, repeated when I mentioned it. Maggie, that property hasn't been available in 40 years. It's the most prestigious address in Millbrook Heights. Millbrook Heights, the neighborhood James and Jessica dreamed of but could never afford. The place they'd drive through on Sundays while living in their modest colonial. The mortgage they'd pushed me out to afford. Is it for sale? I asked simply. Well, yes, but Jennifer hesitated. The asking price is $4.2 million? Let's see it.
The estate was breathtaking. 12,000 square feet of classic elegance on 8 manicured acres. A master suite with fireplaces, a floor-to-ceiling library, a chef's kitchen, and a conservatory that was essentially a greenhouse attached to the house. But the true clincher was the view from the master bedroom. You could see all of Millbrook below, including the neighborhood where James and Jessica lived. Every morning I could wake and literally look down on those who had looked down on me. The sellers are motivated, Jennifer explained as we toured the wine cellar. They've relocated and want a quick closing. Cash offer, I said without pause. $3.8 million, close in 2 weeks. Jennifer nearly dropped her clipboard. Maggie, are you certain? That's an immense commitment. I was more than certain. My business could cover the payments easily, and my investments allowed for the down payment without touching operations. But more than that, I could afford it because I'd earned every cent through my own grit, intelligence, and labor. The sellers accepted within 6 hours. 2 weeks later, I stood in the grand foyer of my new home, holding the keys, almost laughing at the sheer turn of events. 6 years earlier, I'd slept in a motel with less than $1,000. Now I owned the most valuable property in the county. The movers came the next day. My apartment furniture looked laughably small in these vast rooms, a delightful problem to have. That first evening, I sat on the expansive back deck, watching the sunset paint the sky. The silence was profound. Only peace, space, and the deep satisfaction of a vision realized. My phone buzzed. A text from Eleanor. Saw the transfer in the paper. You magnificent woman. Champagne this weekend? I smiled, typing back, bring the good stuff. We're toasting new beginnings. What I didn't say was that some beginnings require endings, and I had a feeling the ending to my story with James and Jessica was about to become very, very clear. The doorbell chimed at 9:17 the next Saturday morning, exactly 24 hours after the real estate announcement appeared in the local paper. I was in my new kitchen, still learning where everything belonged, when the sound echoed through the marble foyer. On the security monitor, yes, the system was formidable, I saw them on my porch. James looked older, dressed in careful weekend casual. Jessica stood beside him in designer wear. Behind them were 2 teenagers I scarcely recognized, Emma, now 16, and Tony, 14. I took my time. 6 years of silence, and they arrived the day after learning I was wealthy? Predictable, almost comically so. Well, well, I said, opening the door but leaving the screen locked. James, Jessica, children, To what do I owe this surprise? Mom? James began, voice unsteady. We saw about the house. We wanted to congratulate you. How thoughtful. Message delivered. Anything else? Jessica stepped forward with a polished, empty smile. Maggie, we know things ended poorly. We've reflected. We handled it all wrong. Handled it all wrong, I repeated slowly. Is that the phrase we're using? Emma shifted behind them. Grandma Maggie, I barely remember you, but Mom and Dad said you made amazing cookies. Her innocent words struck deep. She barely recalled me because they'd stolen 6 years of her childhood from us both. I did make good cookies, I said softly to her, then to her parents, before I was tossed out. Mom, please, James pleaded. Can we come in? Can we talk? Talk about what precisely? Jessica's mask slipped slightly. We're family, Maggie. Family sticks together, especially when... She gestured vaguely at the mansion behind me. When there's ample room for everyone. There it was, delivered with the subtlety of a hammer. Room for everyone, I mused. How convenient you've rediscovered family now that I have 12,000 square feet. That's unfair, James protested, though his eyes were already inventorying the foyer. We've missed you. The kids have missed having a grandmother. I actually laughed. James, you set me on the porch with 2 suitcases. Jessica said figuring out my life wasn't your concern. Now you've missed me. The silence thickened until Tony spoke. Dad, what is she talking about? Why don't you come in? I said finally, unlocking the screen, since family is the theme. I led them through the foyer, past the chandelier and staircase, into the living room with its sweeping views. I watched their faces take in the details. This is incredible, Tony breathed, going to the windows. Look at the pool, Mom. Jessica was looking, all right. I could almost see the calculations behind her eyes. It's certainly spacious, she said carefully. Almost too large for one person. Is it? I find I enjoy having room to breathe. James perched on the sofa edge. Mom, about 6 years ago, we were under stress. The mortgage, job uncertainty, 2 young kids. So the logical solution was to make your widowed mother homeless. Very sensible. We thought you'd land on your feet, Jessica said defensively. You're so capable. We never pictured you in a motel. You never pictured it because you never bothered to check. Emma was studying an old photo on the side table, James as a boy, sitting on my lap while I read to him. That was after your grandfather left. Your dad and I lived alone for a decade. I worked 3 jobs to keep us going. Drove him to practice every Tuesday and Thursday. I looked straight at James. I believed that meant something. It did mean something, James said quietly. It means everything. That's why we're here. No, I said firmly. You're here because you want something. Will you be honest about what it is, or shall we keep pretending this is about reconnection? Jessica's patience snapped. Fine. Yes, we need help. James lost his job. We're behind on the mortgage. Emma needs college application fees. Satisfied? Deliriously, I said dryly. Now we have truth. We were thinking, James cut in, shooting Jessica a look. You have all this space, and we're in a tight spot. You want to move in. I stated. It wasn't a question. Temporarily, Jessica added quickly, just until James finds something. 6 months? A year tops.
I gazed around my serene living room, then back at the four who discarded me the moment I became inconvenient. Let me be certain I understand. You wish to move your family into my home because you're in financial trouble. We're family, James repeated as if the word were a magic key. Family, I mused. Was that the word used when I was locked out? When I said my life wasn't your problem? The quiet was broken only by the antique clock on the mantel. Finally, Tony asked again, "What happened 6 years ago? Why won't anyone tell us?" I looked at these grandchildren I'd been robbed of knowing and decided. "Sit down," I told them. "Both of you, it's time you learned who your parents truly are." "Mom, don't," James warned. I held up a hand. "Emma, Tony, 6 years ago, your grandfather died. I was 60, newly widowed, and needed a temporary place while I figured things out. Your parents invited me to stay. For 3 months, I helped with childcare, contributed my Social Security to expenses, and tried to stay unobtrusive." The teenagers listened intently. "Then one morning, your mother decided I was too set in my ways and said I had to leave. Immediately. Your father packed my things into 2 suitcases and set them on the porch. I had $847 and nowhere to go." "That's not how it was," Jessica protested. "You undermined us with the children." "I made them breakfast and reminded them to say please and thank you. Apparently that was undermining." "Where did you go? What did you do?" "A motel for 6 weeks, then a studio above a pizza shop. I worked part-time at a garden center for $15 an hour." I allowed a small smile. "Ironically, the best thing that ever happened to me." "How?" Emma asked. "Because it taught me I could take care of myself. Better than fine, as you see." "This is old history," Jessica said, agitated. "We're trying to move forward, to rebuild." "No," I interrupted. "You're trying to rebuild your finances. There's a difference." I took out my phone. "This text is from a friend at the unemployment office. She mentioned a familiar name recently." I looked at James. "You weren't laid off 3 months ago. You were fired 6 months back for falsifying expenses." James paled. "How did you—" "I know things, James. I know Jessica maxed out 3 new credit cards last year on designer clothes and spas. I know you refinanced your house twice to fund a vacation. I know foreclosure is next month." The room went utterly still. "I also know that you drove past my motel every single day for 6 months after throwing me out. You knew exactly where I was, exactly how I was struggling, and you never once stopped to see if I was alive."
Emma's eyes glistened. "Dad, is that true?" James couldn't meet her gaze. Jessica shifted to full attack. "Fine, we made mistakes. You did too. You could have asked for help instead of vanishing for 6 years." I laughed. Asked for help from the people who told me my life wasn't their problem? From the woman who called me a burden? We were young. We were stressed. "You were cruel," I said quietly. "And now you want me to forget because you need something from me." Tony stood suddenly, face flushed. "This is messed up. Dad, you told us Grandma moved to Florida to be near her sister. You said she didn't want to see us." "We never exactly said that," James started. "Yes, you did," Emma jumped up, voice rising. "You said she chose a new life over us. You made us think she left." I felt a pang of vindication, mixed with sorrow. These children had been lied to for 6 years. "There's more," I said softly.
About 6 months after I left, your father came to see me. Jessica's head whipped toward James. What? You didn't tell her? I asked James, genuinely surprised. How interesting. James was sweaty now. Mom, please. He showed up at my apartment one evening, I continued, watching Jessica. He'd been drinking. He was crying. Said he'd made a terrible mistake, wanted me to come home. You're lying, Jessica said, but her voice wavered.
I pulled up an old photo on my phone. I took a picture of the letter he wrote that night. Should I read it aloud? The letter was 3 handwritten pages. In it, James apologized for letting Jessica convince him to cast me out. He admitted missing me, said the house felt empty, realized he'd chosen his wife's convenience over his mother's well-being. The most damning part, begged me not to tell Jessica because she'd threatened to leave him if he tried to bring me back. He chose you, I told Jessica calmly. He chose keeping you happy over doing right by his mother, and for 6 years, he's hidden it. Jessica turned on James, fury plain. You went behind my back? You wrote her a letter? I was drunk. I wasn't thinking. No, you were thinking clearly for the first time in months. That's what frightened you. Emma was crying openly now. 6 years. We lost 6 years with you because of lies.
But here's the thing, I said, standing and smoothing my blouse. I'm not the woman I was 6 years ago. That woman was broken, willing to accept crumbs from those who saw her as a burden. I walked to the window. This woman owns a multi-million-dollar business. This woman has friends who respect her, employees who rely on her, investments that generate more in a month than your father made in a year. This woman needs nothing from anyone, especially not from those who discarded her and now want to move into her home because they've mismanaged their own lives. The quiet stretched until Tony asked, his voice small, So, you don't want a relationship with us, even though we were lied to? The question ached, but I kept my composure. I want a relationship with you and Emma. You're innocent in this. But your parents? I looked at James and Jessica. They will have to earn their way back, if they can. Jessica stood abruptly, all pretense gone. This is absurd. We're your family. You can't pick and choose. Watch me, I replied calmly. Fine, she snapped. You want to play games? Punish us for ancient history? We'll leave. James, kids, we don't need this. But Emma didn't move. Neither did Tony. Actually, Emma said quietly, I want to stay and talk to Grandma Maggie, alone. Emma, we're leaving, Jessica commanded. No, Emma's voice grew stronger. I'm 16 and just learned you've lied to me for 6 years about my grandmother. I want to hear her side. Tony nodded. Me too. Jessica looked ready to erupt, but James touched her arm. Maybe we should give them time. Don't you dare take her side, Jessica hissed. I'm not choosing sides, but he was looking at me with something like regret. I'm thinking of what's best for our children. For a moment, I glimpsed the man who'd written that letter, torn between his wife and his conscience. The moment faded. Fine, Jessica said, but this isn't over, Maggie. We'll be back. No, I said firmly. You won't. Not unless invited. This is my home, my property, with a top-tier security system. Show up uninvited again, and you'll be arrested for trespassing. Jessica's face flushed crimson. You can't keep us from our children. I'm not keeping anyone apart, but I won't let you use them as leverage. Emma and Tony are welcome here any time they wish. You and James are not. Not until you've proven change. Proven how?
James asked. I considered. Start by telling your children the full truth, not your spin, the actual truth. Then put your financial house in order without asking me for a cent. Show me you can stand as the adults you claim to be. Then, maybe, we can discuss forgiveness. Maybe. I offered a cool smile. But I wouldn't hold my breath.
After they left, I spent 2 hours with Emma and Tony, answering questions, sharing old photos, listening to their stories. They were good kids, despite everything. I saw echoes of the little boy I'd raised in them both. "Can we come back next weekend?" Emma asked at the door. "Any time," I promised. "I have 6 years of grandmothering to make up for." Watching their car wind down the driveway, I felt a profound satisfaction. Not vengeance, but justice. Those who'd thrown me away were now pleading for scraps, while the woman they discarded lived in splendor they could never reach. I'd proven that being cast aside doesn't determine your value. Sometimes it frees you to discover it. And sometimes the greatest response is simply to live well. The next morning, I called Eleanor. "How do you feel?" she asked after hearing everything. I looked over my grounds, sipped coffee from fine china, and smiled. "I feel," I said, "exactly where I belong, finally." Some victories are quiet. This one was perfect. Thank you for listening. Don't forget to subscribe to Shattered Voices and share your own story in the comments. Your voice matters.